Okay, so we may start with our first speaker, Dr. Nora Ramtke from Ruhr-Universität Bochum. She's a member of the research unit Journalliteratur and principal investigator of the sub-project Collections Formats, Practices of Reprinting between Anthologization of the Periodical and Periodicization of the Anthology. Her research interests include periodicals, anthologies, and printing collections, focusing on the 18th and 19th centuries, as well as practices of imitation, media history, literary plagiarism, and copyright history. And today she will deliver a presentation titled Europa, 1835-1844, and its supplements, archiving the abundance. So please, Nora, you may share your screen and start your presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mara, for this kind introduction, and thanks to the organizing team for giving me the opportunity to share and discuss with you some material I've lately been working on. And yeah, the general theme of this third ESPRit seminar series you mentioned is sources beyond the periodical text. And I would like to address the question of sources beyond the periodical text a little more fundamentally by scrutinizing what a periodical text is altogether. But just to be clear, I'm not going to talk about literary theory, quite the opposite. What fascinates me about the question of sources beyond the periodical text is that it is by no means always clear what exactly is the periodical text and what lies beyond it when it comes to archiving practices. Asking about the sources it implies the possibility or indeed the necessity of drawing a line between the periodical text itself and the periphery, and yeah, I put that in inverted commas just to be sure to problematize this. However, in my experience, the closer you get to the material, the less clear these lines become. And I guess bibliographers know that only too well. So what I'm going to do in the next, well, I don't know, 15 minutes or 20 minutes is to take a deep dive into periodical materiality and to show you just one but very messy example that is not only a sign of the proliferation of periodical print formats in the 1830s, but of divergent archival practices and the try to deal with it. So, and hang on, this it is Europa, Chronik der gebildeten Welt. So that would be translated Europe, Chronicle of the Educated World, a periodical edited by August Lewald. That run from 1835 to 1844 and then continued, but it was sold and continued under a new or different editor. Europa, the periodical, considered itself to be the first German review based on the successful models of the French and the British press. It came out in weekly issues or installments of 3 sheets of paper, 3 sheets printed paper in quarto, that is about 48 pages each week. These weekly publications were neither numbered nor dated and aimed at archiving in quarterly volumes, for which purpose title page and tables of contents were issued quarterly. So what I'm trying to do now is to give you an overview of this periodical print publication, of what it consisted. That is, first of all, a main part And this main part of each weekly issue consisted of literary genre paintings, reports on historical episodes or contemporary culture or social events, travelogues or longish excerpts of novels, dramatic pieces, ballads, most of them actually translated from various European languages. This part of the periodical was very bookish. It was printed in a bookish layout with consecutive numbering, without a consecutive numbering of articles, or yeah, and it's just these texts, one after another. And as you can, I mean, it's not important the example I know here shown, but there are a lot of texts from various countries, French, England, but also from other countries, and this was this kind of yeah, cross marketing, adoption, compilation, translation of texts already printed. Then, secondly, we have not only this main part, but a feuilleton. This that came along with this bookish main section, and this feuilleton was typographically separated. It was printed in 2 columns, as you can see, making it thus look much more periodical-like in terms of its visual appearance, and then the main part. Both the main section and the feuilleton were paginated throughout, so the numbers ran through. And interestingly enough, this feuilleton from this Europa is actually the first feuilleton in German periodical publishing newspapers. So it paved the way for the feuilleton as a generic rubric of periodical publishing in Germany. Then, thirdly, we have here the supplement Telegraph von Deutschland, German Telegraph. The first year was accompanied by this supplement. It was also printed in 2 columns with small wood engravings, but just the small ones. And unlike the rest of the Europa, this telegraph was initially numbered and dated and paginated separately. But in the second year, it looked already more like the feuilleton, so that is 2 columns, but not dated anymore. And it finally then, I think in the third year, disappeared, so it wasn't very successful. There were over more artistic supplements. Each issue included 2 or 3 artistic supplements, like all sorts of illustrations, lithographs, steel engravings, music supplements, and of course, as you can see here, fashion plates. And I just brought a few examples of this variety of artistic supplements. There were, of course, much more of them in of different techniques and different sizes. This a fashion plate is from the French Petit Courrier de Dames. And that was considered a novum that Lewald, I think from the second year onwards, published original Parisian fashion plates, but not copies. So these were not copies. He must receive them through the post, or actually, I don't know how that really worked, but that were the original French ones, and he would advertise it very much that way. So I brought another few examples of this artistic supplements. This one, or a caricature like this one, you probably, all of you know, those of you who work on periodicals of the 19th century or are familiar with them. So this is the editor showing him with scissor and paste. So this, there are lots of caricatures or pictures like that in 19th century press. This, for example, is a drawing that depicts the translation of the ashes of Napoleon in the 1840s that clearly exceeds the size of the periodical. It is obvious that illustrations like this one are not made to be folded up several times and stored in a bound volume, but find their purpose beyond the archive periodical. And this is an assumption that supplements like this are not really meant to be stored within the bound volume is the next example. That is a facsimile of a poem written by Heinrich Heine, famous German author, Buch der Lieder, so kind of poem collection. And it just so Heine was actually a friend of the editor August Lewald. That is probably why he was able to print one of this facsimile. I think it was in his private possession, so the original. And I when I prepared my lecture for today, I happened to learn that we can actually buy this facsimile for 26 euros, so not that much. And this clearly indicates that it was once removed and preserved, not as a periodical, but yeah, stored somewhere else and now being sold or like just without the periodical, just this facsimile. But I have not found a image of it, so in which state it is, I don't know. But 26 euro, you can go for it. Furthermore, the Europa consisted of musical supplements like this one, the musical sheets, which sometimes were just one page, but often, like this one, designed to fold them to a small 4-page kind of booklet, I guess. So this is printed on both sides. This is the front size, actually. So here you cut it out, or the other way around. Here's it sticked in. You fold it here, and then you have here a front page. This is a back page with some, don't know, I think that's the text. And then inside you have here the musical notes to sing it or with accompany it with piano playing. Yeah. So but that's not all. We still have other supplement. That is the one I'm interested in. Mara noticed, told you that I'm dealing with kind of anthologizing practices, and that's why I'm interested in this album, Der Boudoirs, is it called? It's printed from September 1836 onwards as an anthology or lyrical album, and that was issued together with the Europa. In the first year, 4 pages weekly were issued, and then later on monthly, a full sheet that is 16 pages. And from then on, it consisted of poems exclusively. In the first year, there were prose text as well, but then it were only poems. The frame pages were elegantly printed with a large amount of blank space around it, giving the work an elegant look. And the peritextual layout of the album aimed at separate binding. That's important for my argument today. Layout and page numbers differed from the Europa, from the periodical, and separate title pages were issued. This, however, created a constant uncertainty about what belongs to the periodical text and what is to be considered as a work on its own, distributed just together with the periodical Europa. These copies, for example, were bound separate. So this one you see right now here at the screen, this were bound separately. But there are many copies with album sheets bound into the volume consecutively, like the Cologne copy I just showed you, or a copy of the Austrian National Library I found digitized. But there are also volumes that have the album attached to the volume, that is at the last part of the volume, just at the end. That was the case with, for example, the Munich copy, or a copy of the University of California. I found that via Google Books, but there are, of course, many more. To make things still a bit more complicated, together with the album, 3 illustrations were published each month, which can be considered a supplement to the supplement. As for the illustrations, make no reference to the content of the respective album, but are dedicated to works by German classics or popular writers, to Uhland in the second year, for example, or to Schiller's dramatic works in 1839 and 1814. Oh, hang on. Sorry. Okay. And here we can see these illustrations to the album. This one, three pages, 3 papers, 3 sheets, and this is a page from the album, and you can see it's smaller than actually the rest of the periodical. They have a different size. So in the beginning, in the first year, they didn't really fit together, the size of the illustration and the size of the album. That's why from the second year onwards, the album changed its size, having thus not anymore the typical small octavo format of strongly gendered almanacs, gift books, or annuals that were like really small publications. But the advantage that now the art sheets and poems could be bound together outweighed, of course, this disadvantage. And here you can see how it nicely goes together, the illustrations and the poems on one in the same size. Moreover, to make things again a little bit more complicated, these illustrations by the artist Julius Niesler, how he was called, could be bound separately, but they also could be purchased separately. This is a title page, a second title page. I think to serve the purpose that someone wants to bind just illustrations together without the poems. I'm not sure, but it just looks like. I didn't find a copy of that, but it maybe exists. But yeah, you also could purchase them without the poems, just the illustrations, and that was looked like this one. Sorry for this bad quality. This is this so-called Schiller Gallery, kind of picture gallery, separated publication, but published with the same publisher, with exactly the illustrations that were issued before in the periodical Europa. Obviously, we are dealing with a case of very clever and, for the time, probably characteristic cross-marketing, which provided the basis for the commercial success of Lewalds Europa. But before I finish, I would like to come back to the question of archiving this material abundance in terms of deciding what gets bound up together in a volume, and in what order it gets bound up, and what is archived beyond the periodical text. As I mentioned, the text of the main section appeared in a rather bookish layout, with large margins and loose leading, printed without interruption and classification into rubrics. Due to the fact that neither single issues nor articles were numbered or dated, it is almost impossible to know what belongs to a certain issue, or to put it the other way around. Without the typographically separated feuilleton, printed in two columns as the last part of each issue, and the artistic supplements, which differed materially in terms of format, of size of the sheets, of paper quality. So the fashion plates, for example, that's really thick paper. The act of binding, so without the supplement, the act of binding and archiving would have completely leveled the boundaries between individual issues. Only by this, literally interrupting material bound volumes of the Periodical Europa would be to a large extent book-like. So that they would be bookish. Like, you can't really notice where one issue starts and where the other ends. And in fact, I found a copy. This is it. In the Leipzig library from Leipzig University, and I think the owner of this copy obviously has opted for the largest possible book shape by sorting out everything that looked like supplements, including the feuilleton, that consisted of short notes and was printed in these two columns, and thus just looked very periodical like. But there was obviously one problem. The main section and the pages of the feuilleton were paginated throughout, so that the end of each issue, that is materially not noticeable as such, there is a gap in the pagination between because the feuilleton is now separated, and that is why the librarians of the Leipzig university library, added a short note at each individual volume, stating a purchased defective. So this is here wurde defekt gekauft, that is purchased defective, and they indicate some of the missing pages. However, in no case, literally no case, all of the missing pages. So they kind of browse through the volumes, saw that there are some pages missing, but in fact they didn't found all, because after each issue pages are missing. What can we then learn from this case? First of all, when we get into periodicals, things get complicated, and they become all the more complicated the closer you get to the material. Secondly, what the periodical text is and what lies beyond it is ultimately a question of perspective. Librarians, readers, researchers will answer it differently depending on the given interests and modes of use, obviously. And finally, there's probably, no such thing as the periodical, or maybe to put it less polemically, when we speak of a certain periodical, there is merely an abstraction of different, sometimes more, sometimes less, identical copies, depending on the given publishing, reading, binding, and archiving practices. And to be honest, this insight is anything but new. Scholars like Laura Brake and many, many more have pointed this out before. So in this sense, my contribution today is just a little reminder for me, for us, to be careful when it comes to materiality of periodicals.